As coronavirus cases spread all over the world, we are getting puzzlingly bad, incomplete, or sometimes contradictory information from health authorities. Hello, everyone. This is Chris Martinson here with your COVID-19, aka the honey badger virus update. It's March 2nd, 2020. I needed yesterday off, and it was good for me to recharge. So here I am back at it, and I'm going to have to call this one time to triage. And I'm going to spend a lot less time on all the new cases out there because I think we're kind of past that. We'll track it, but that, I think, is it's run its course in terms of convincing anybody that we've got something because of all the new cases. But here's a few. Let's just take a look at some of these. The number of confirmed cases has now reached 90,000. I think that's vastly, vastly understated because of how China was massaging their numbers, and how I think Iran isn't being completely honest, and all of that. But let's go with that for now. And the number of cases outside China surpassed a magic number, 10,000, if you like big round numbers. Italy, 340 new cases, raising their total to over 2,000 right now. And their death toll's up to 52 with 18 new deaths. Recently, Spain, 36 new cases. Now they're at 120, so they've cracked the 100 mark, and that's a big, another dividing line where I think you've gone into clear and obvious sustained community-level transmission there. Netherlands, 8 new cases. They're up to 18 now, and the Netherlands health authorities badly flat-footed on this whole thing, and really tone-deaf, I believe, as well. How many new cases? First case is Tunisia. First case, Jordan. First case, Latvia, Senegal. First case is Saudi Arabia. First case, Moscow. First case. So this is still spreading all over the place, and I know all of these countries have been very, very aggressively attempting not to have new cases coming in. And the one I want to talk about and focus in on a bit, I think Egypt actually has a big problem right now. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that it's where Iran was just a week or two ago. This comes from today being March 2nd, so this is very current, and the date matters because the next article I'm going to show you comes from yesterday. Egypt's health ministry and the World Health Organization announced in a joint statement, so the WHO is in on this one, on Monday, that a foreigner was tested positive for new coronavirus inside Egypt, and that person was taken to an isolation hospital, currently receiving the necessary medical care. Announcing that on their Facebook page. Very nice. That all sounds nice, but here's the other news that came out yesterday. This was brought to my attention by an alert reader who sent me a private message at my site. Thank you very much for this. 4 new COVID cases linked to Egypt. So 4 people who had recently traveled to Egypt were diagnosed with COVID-19 virus over the weekend. You have a French health minister confirming 2 elderly French tourists had contracted the virus. Ontario government said a Canadian man had tested positive, and fourth, a Taiwanese person who had traveled to Egypt and the UAE was reported to have tested positive for COVID-19 yesterday. So, hey, we don't know. Maybe these people all caught it, somewhere else and all of that. But this is exactly what we saw coming out of Iran before that exploded, and the cases just went crazy there. So these 4 cases, if these are coming out of Egypt, there's only 2 possibilities. One, there's a super spreader cab driver who took all these people to the airport. Maybe you could contact trace that down. Or there's a lot more cases there than they know about. Certainly way more than 2. By the time you'd have 4 spread out of Egypt, we would measure this in the thousands, not in 2. So I think Egypt looks like a big problem. And I just want to remind everybody, as you look through this and you see just these first cases, but then you see these other places that have exploded, this is the disease progression I want to take you through for a virus that has an R0 of somewhere between 4 and 7, somewhere in that zone. We don't know. The disease progression, you get a case. You hear all the public statements by the health authorities. Hey, no worries, don't panic. We've got this. Just wash your hands. Don't use face masks. No, you don't need to store any food. Case. We're still okay. Cluster, boom. And you have your exponential explosion out of that. That's how exponential growth goes. If you haven't seen my special piece on exponential growth, it's a YouTube thing that I put out in 2008, long time ago. People just don't understand exponential growth. And it's very difficult, and it goes slow for a while, slow, and then boom. We think linearly. We're good at stuff that looks like this, but not like that curve right there. And I saw this summary from Ben Hunt. I love this guy. He's got great ways of talking and about things and articulating things. So I saw him lay it out like this, and I think that's exactly right. So you just have to figure out where you are in your country or your community Are you in the case stage? Are you in the cluster stage? Because if you are, the next thing you have to expect is the boom stage. All right. And in the United States, I think we're well on our way here. Again, not to focus on the United States solely, but I think it does have some bearing on how the overall world economy unfolds here, being the world's largest economy. So this was a study. A lot of people sent it to me. Thank you to everybody who did. And what this is a cladogram here, and they're looking at, fancy word, the phylogeny. That's the family tree of these viruses. And each, there's you can track them because they'll have slight genetic mutations as they go along. They make little copying mistakes, nothing vital, doesn't change anything, but there's a little copying mistake, and then you can compare where that virus came from. And the concern was in this report was they showed that there was this one case of a person who had traveled back from Wuhan, was the first case in the United States, I believe. And so they took the genotype of that, and then they compared it to the most recent case, which was a teenage boy, all the way out here 6 weeks later, and they're the same. So the translation of that is that the first case and the second case are genetically linked. The scary bit is those two cases are 6 weeks apart. The conclusion from that is it's been circulating for at least 6 weeks undetected. It had to get from this person to this person somehow, right? The prediction from that is there's many, many more cases to come from that because there are all those other undetected cases out there right now. And I put all that up yesterday. Today, we see this in the Washington Post, same conclusion, that this coronavirus has been circulating undetected, possibly infected scores of people over the past 6 weeks in Washington state. So yes, that has sobering implications, and let me spell them out for you. It means that they're going in Washington state. They're right about here in this story right here. So we'll see those clusters. They've had their first cluster at an old folks home. We'll get a couple more clusters, and then boom, it'll look a lot like what we're seeing out of Italy, out of Spain, out of France, other places like that, if it follows the same progression. All right. One of the big things in the United States has been an absolute lack of testing. So what I want to do here is I want to play a little something that was on CNBC just this morning, and we'll just let this tape roll.
Let me tell you the problem right now. Before I came here this morning, I was in the emergency room seeing patients. I still do not have a rapid diagnostic test available to me.
Well, that's easy to do, is it not? Is it hard to manufacture?
It is easy to do for some countries. What happened in the United States is that the CDC created a test,
up a reagent,
sent a test out to 50 states, and then said, oh, hold up, don't use it, let us fix it.
How quickly
it's
can
now
we get
March.
On track now, Matt?
We hear that it's coming very soon, but I'm here to tell you right now, at one of the busiest hospitals in the country, I don't have it at my fingertips. I still have to call the Department of Health. I still have to make my case plead to test people. This is not good. We know that there are 88 cases in the United States. There are going to be hundreds by middle of the week. There's going to be thousands by next week. And this is
Yeah, very much not good. I think Dr. Matt McCarthy got that just right. And I would bet there's already thousands of cases because that 6 weeks in Washington is a very long time to spread. Where else is it spreading like this? Pretty much all over the place. And so that leads to this next observation, which is this. The places that are testing most aggressively are showing up with lots and lots of cases. And I think somebody made a really great point, and I'd like to pass it along. And I picked this up on Twitter, so I apologize, forget who I got this from, but it was a great point. I'll search it out later and make sure I make note of that, because they noted that if you're doing more testing and you're detecting more cases, that might explain why your total death, and I didn't pull the column over, but also very low numbers of people in serious condition, probably because they're detecting more people, many of those who are in the low symptomatic non-dangerous, serious sort of a category. So that could explain why South Korea has so many total cases and relatively proportionally fewer deaths, fewer serious cases, is because they're doing so much testing. Italy is doing lots of testing. I think these Iran numbers are completely bogus. So we're finding that, but other places are not doing a lot of testing. Germany, France, Spain, USA, which we just heard about. And there could be a lot of reasons for that. I can't come up with a good reason why some of the wealthiest countries out there have not managed to figure out how to do lots and lots of rapid testing. But you can't be faulted for coming to this actual conclusion. This observation is, you can't have cases if you don't run any tests. And that, I'm not sure if that's the strategy here, but it certainly seems to be the case, thinking about that poor doctor on there running one of the largest hospitals and having to beg to have cases run. And I've got tons of stories and anecdotes in my email inbox of people having that same issue where they had presumptive contact with somebody who seemingly had the chance of having the COVID-19 or the honey badger virus, and begging their doctors to test them. They're like, no, and they had to fight through. Most of them can't get tested. They're just not doing it. It's not available. So that's a bizarre thing, and it's not how you fight a disease like this, of course, and we'll get to why you want to detect early and often. Again, just to belabor the point. As well, even if you get tested and it is negative, doesn't mean you're in the clear, right? So this case just came up today, March 2nd. Texas woman tests positive for coronavirus after release from quarantine, may have exposed a dozen others. She definitely exposed a dozen others, but whether they caught it or not is a may in this story. A woman who was released from quarantine in San Antonio before health officials learned she had tested positive for the new coronavirus may have exposed up to a dozen people at a hotel before she was brought back into isolation. They said that CDC said it was retesting the patient who had been released from isolation Saturday, but later returned after a lab test was weakly positive. So maybe that's a good sign. Hopefully weakly positive means also not spreading it all that well, and which is a possibility. But at any rate, it's very, very, very hard to fight this particular disease because you can be asymptomatic. You can get negative tests. The tests sometimes give false positives. Sometimes they give false negatives. All of that stuff. At any rate, the advice I have here is that everyone, especially healthcare workers here, needs to treat this as an airborne disease. First, all the way back in the Lancet, this came back from January. This was from early case reports that are coming out of China, and that's where the most experience with this came from. A lot of clinical experience, and they wrote in this paper that the link is to here. It's right there. We are concerned that 2019 nCov could have acquired the ability for efficient human transmission. Airborne precautions such as a fit-tested N95 respirator and other personal protective equipment are strongly recommended. So I think you have to go on the presumption that it's airborne until you know otherwise. And we had other weird cases like back there in the case in Hong Kong where it seemed to travel up and down through pipes across many, many stories, 10 stories in one case. How can the coronavirus spread through the bathroom pipes? Experts are investigating. And then more recently, we had that case where this woman who got the disease, presumably somehow from the people who had somehow the disease had escaped quarantine, which was sloppy as all get out, at Travis Air Force Base. She caught it and was circulating around in that Northern California community, and they were just using droplet precautions. That wasn't sufficient, and turns out that more than 120 UC Davis healthcare staff in self-quarantine after possible exposure to the coronavirus. That was Saturday, February 29th, and here we are on Sunday, March 1st, and authorities announced that 2 California healthcare workers test positive. So these are people who are actually running droplet protection and presumably running very good standards for PPE, and all of that, and they got it. So there's just tons of anecdotal evidence. We don't have the full, scientific proof that this is actually airborne, but why wouldn't you operate under the presumption that it is until you can prove that it is not, given how easily it spreads? And we could pull up dozens of other examples here. How well it spread through the Disaster Princess cruise ship, how quickly it's exploding through the various communities in Italy and in South Korea, all that. Tons of data. So to me, that's something that you start with and you disprove, not the other way around. All right. Could we get a seasonal reprieve? And again, if you have spelling errors, fix them. All right. This is great stuff here by Damian Klassen over at Nucleus Wealth. And I really like this chart. I really like this one, which is showing outside of China, because I think we can trust the China data more. Maybe not perfectly, because we aren't testing sufficiently in many countries, but it's better. And it's showing that in the winter countries, you get this still an exponential chart right here, but in the summer equatorial places, it's not really spreading. So Damien went back and looked at that Thailand data and pulled up a really good thing. I might have gotten this one wrong, and I hope I did, because this gives me hope, actually, and let's hope I got this dead wrong. So we look at this shape of the Thailand viral pneumonia cases. It turns out that on the 21st of February, Thailand had expanded its virus detection by changing the way they were recording these things. And so what they had done is they had proactively expanded to people developing pneumonia with unknown causes, right, in all these different places. And so all they did was expand the definition here. And that happened on February 21st, which would be 16, right around here. So everybody who's got pneumonia, anybody for any sort of reason that isn't bacterial, they're going to call them a patient under investigation, take a look at them, and put them in there. Is this more than we would normally expect that time of year? I'm not totally clear because I haven't seen the seasonal data on it. But it could have been that Thailand just simply changed they did. They changed the way in which they started recording these things. So let's hope that's the case, because then that would fit with this, and it would say that we have a summer reprieve coming, potentially, because Thailand being one of those warmer countries. Now, I'm a little concerned if we do have an outbreak in Egypt and parts of Iran right now. Those would be fairly warm areas. We're going to have to watch how it's spreading in all those other places like Jordan, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, all those other places. Because if it does spread in warm weather, and by the way, the reason that we think that maybe we could get a summer reprieve out of something is that that's the behavior of flu. I'm not sure a coronavirus necessarily follows the same pattern. Again, lots of unknowns in this particular story. All right, moving on. We are just bombarded. You should see my inbox, just bombarded with, and a lot of them I can't share because they came from doctors, hospital administrators, nurses who said, here's some information, but please don't share it, talking about the really, really bad, conflicting, contradictory information that they're getting from their health authorities all over the world. Well, not all over the world. I can tell you it's in Germany and the Netherlands, France, United States, places, basically, those sorts of countries. This is a case from Rhode Island, which says, Lord help us get the Department of Health informed. You are contagious even if you're not showing symptoms. Why would she, the health authority in Rhode Island, continually repeat you're only contagious if you're showing symptoms? Yeah, why would you say that? What's the data for that? That's an interesting claim to make. Here's somebody saying, Jonathan saying, I live in Rotterdam, Netherlands, and everyone is downplaying the situation. At RIVM, the Dutch CDC is denying asymptomatic transmission, as well as a longer incubation period, anything over 14 days. The Netherlands has the most dense population in Europe, and here's a conclusion. So, we're seeing lots of stuff like this as well. This comes from Germany. This was great. Thanks. This was an email to me from MH, again, asking for anonymity. Great summary here. The next level of corrupt government, the German CDC, the Robert Koch Institute, is just as useless as the U.S. equivalent. In fact, they are exhibiting sheer incompetence, negligence, and immorality. In press conferences, their chief, Dr. Weiler, was asked some substantial questions, which he was not able to or willing to answer, and their general stance is outrageous. Here are the most horrendous examples. He said, we recommend to wash hands regularly. Gloves do not work. We do not recommend using masks, and we do not recommend disinfectants. I kid you not. And I believe this is due to the supply situation, because the government did not source supplies. It is now competing with the populace for the remaining scraps. I think that's you can probably draw that inference in a lot of places. So they give out bad advice because they don't want to give out the good advice, which is, hey, we messed up, we forgot to plan. Because we failed to plan, we actually planned to fail, and now we're a little bit embarrassed, and we would rather not compete with the general population for the few face masks and required disinfectants that are needed in the hospitals. That's totally fine. Just to own it up and own it. Say, we messed up, and we'd like your help. We're all in this together, and wouldn't everybody love to have a healthy, a set of workers in the healthcare situation? I would, if you explained it to me, said, listen, Chris, just go home and self-isolate. Don't catch anything if you can. But if you did come to the hospital, wouldn't you want it to be properly staffed and not overwhelmed? And I'd say, of course. And I would, under those circumstances, I would go for that if that was the situation. But don't tell me that disinfectants don't work. And when asked how many hospital beds and intensive care beds are available, he said he doesn't know. He doesn't have the number. Can't speak to that. That would be kind of an awesome thing for your chief of the the CDC and equivalent to know, I would think. Asked about the reports of possible reinfections with SARS-CoV-2, which is a good question to ask. He had no information on that, acted as if he'd never heard about that. Asked about the reports that the incubation period may be substantially longer than 14 days. He had no information on that, acted as if he'd never heard about that. Just tons and tons of just mistakes going on down there. And I'll let you pause that and read that if you want. I thought this was a great summary. Really puzzlingly wrong stuff here was a number of about 3 or 4 days ago, the director of the U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention said the virus can survive on surfaces, including copper, steel, cardboard, and plastic. Robert Redfield said the virus can survive for about 2 hours on copper and steel surfaces, while it can last longer on cardboard and plastic. Well, that's an interesting claim to make because the data, which was a nice study came out about a month ago, said the analysis of 22 studies, so this is a meta-analysis looking at 22 separate studies that had really looked at this across a variety of human coronaviruses, reveals that human coronaviruses such as SARS, MERS, or endemic human coronaviruses can persist on inanimate surfaces like metal, glass, or plastic for up to 9 days. That's not about 2 hours. This is badly out of sync with each other. He ought to know this data. I mean, we knew this data weeks ago when I pulled it up, right? But can be efficiently inactivated, here's the good news, by surface disinfection with about a 70% ethanol, 0.5% hydrogen peroxide, or my fave, 0.1% sodium hypochlorite, aka bleach, aka Clorox. So yes, it can be inactivated with disinfectants. So what is this? We do not recommend disinfectants from the German CDC. It lasts for up to 2 hours, about 2 hours from the U.S. CDC. This is crazy. And by the way, here's the table from that summary study showing all of these different things, just so you can see. They're run at different temperatures, how long, and then they measured the persistence, like how long are these things still capable of infecting. I believe they're using cell cultures in most of these cases, things like that. So MERS, and SARS, like on metal, 5 days, right? Metal surfaces. So that would be doorknobs. That would be railings. That would be things like that. Plastic. Let's go to plastic over here, and let's look at SARS, the closest relative of this particular thing. Less than or equal to 5 days. So that might be things like elevator buttons, pens. Somebody hands you their phone, something like that, right? 5 days on silicone rubber here, right? So these things are actually, coronaviruses are very persistent. In fact, where can you, let's see, HCOV on aluminum might have given you 2 hours, but everything else here is much, much longer than that, running into the days. So this is just wrong. And so that's what I meant by saying there's a lot of this contradictory information out there. From March 2nd, that's today. Yes, this is still a thing. Dr. Drew, media needs to shut up about coronavirus. You're more likely to die of influenza. Yep, this is still a thing. Or how about on Tucker Carlson? I love Tucker's program, but they had this guy, Dr. Siegel, on, was talking about how, regular citizens shouldn't have face masks because they don't work. But how about this? He's got this thing on inside out, and there's the metal band at the bottom. He's got it upside down and inside out, pointing at it, explaining why these things aren't going to protect you from getting the virus. And how, of course, he's absolutely right when it's that negligently put on. And I don't think it's possible. How is this possible to do it this wrong and this bad? So I hope Tucker has the chance to correct that, because this is just not just horrendously bad information, but it's malpractice in this particular case, if I could use a judgment about it. All right, vaccines. Lots of people asking me about vaccines. I'm really hopeful for a vaccine. Hopefully we can get to a summer lull in this thing, and scientists are working like crazy on it. But this kind of stuff drives me a little bit crazy, where we had this headline, a lot of people sent me this, I'm still getting it. In a few weeks, we will have coronavirus vaccine. Okay, so you have to understand something here, that this is coming from a small, cash-hungry company that's trying out a brand new type of a virus vaccine. It's pretty interesting, new technology. It's got some track record, which is good, but I don't know that I wasn't able to find any good human exemplar of that. So let's talk about this vaccine for a second. I got the next two pictures from this link down here on Twitter from Florian Kramer. Great stuff. I really like these pictures. So this is your SARS and coronavirus and nCov sort of thing. This is what they look like here, right? So you've got a variety of things. You've got these spike proteins here. You've got your envelope proteins here. There's a couple of different flavors of those. And then you've got your nucleoprotein in there. This is the positive sense RNA strand in here. That's the machinery, that's the instructions to rebuild one of these things. Now this spike protein, see all that beautiful 3D conformational shape? If you change even just one of these little bumps in here, it just doesn't work as well. So this is the shape, this overall 3D topological shape is going to be the shape that you're going to try and get the body to recognize. When a vaccine comes along, it's recognizing something about this, particularly usually on the outside. Usually this would be a great target, the spike protein, because if you can inactivate that, it's no longer going to bind to the receptors that it's going in. So that's awesome. But let's talk about these different vaccines. So the time frame, 6 to 18 months. First, there's a good manufacturing process, GMP process. You've got to go through the development and make sure you can manufacture this vaccine in at least enough scale to run trials. And then you run your trials, phase 1, pure safety. Phase 2, minimal efficacy, does it work at all, and enough to gather data so that we can conduct a proper phase 3 trial, lots of patients, gathering tons of data. And again, we're looking for safety and efficacy. Vaccines fail all the time here and here and here. They fail all the time in those things, right? So it's not a slam dunk. It's not like saying, in a few weeks, in a few weeks, what they're going to have is a vaccine candidate to push into the testing process, which would start here. All right, now we've said it's really safe. You go through all this review over here, and once you've passed review, now you got to get into large-scale production and distribution. You might run into trouble here. It might be very difficult to manufacture at scale. It might be not very stable at different temperatures. You might discover all kinds of things. Lots of things happen between here and here. And of course, and then you go into administration of it. You get it into people somehow, and immunity develops. All right, so there's lots of different types of vaccine candidates out there that I'm really excited about. I've been reading up a lot about these RNA vaccines. You actually give RNA straight into the body of the test animal or subject that you want to have develop immunity, and somehow this RNA gets taken up, and the body expresses the protein and makes antibodies against it. Kind of cool. Same thing, DNA vaccines as well. It gets the body to manufacture the antigen itself. There's recombinant protein vaccines. That's what these people are developing, I believe. It's a chimeric, meaning chimera means made of two parts. So it's got a human part and a chicken part, or whatever the chimera is. Could be two dissimilar proteins, but I think that's what they're running, is a recombinant protein vaccine. There are vectored vaccines. These are the ones you are more commonly aware of as inactivated vaccines, or even a live attenuated vaccine, meaning the virus is still alive, but it's been mostly attenuated, killed, so it's not that effective anymore. So these are the ones that we normally run. And by the way, running some of these in SARS, trying to create a SARS vaccine, we talked about this weeks ago, had actually created a worse outcome for the animals. Well, the vaccine was developed. It was put into the animals. The animals developed antibodies. Yay. That's how it's supposed to work. But then when they got re-exposed to the SARS virus again on a second time, they had really horrendous outcomes and they died. So that's why we go through clinical trials like this. These can take a while. And if any safety stuff comes up, you got to wonder about that. So this isn't just, you got to figure out, not just does it the human make antibodies once they've tried it, but what happens when they see the virus again? Or in the case of the dengue fever, you get antibodies to strain number 1, but when you see strain 2, that's when you get the dengue hemorrhagic fever and other similar bad outcomes. All right, the nCov, the Honey Badger Balancing Act here, it looks like this, and I've reconfigured this because I think this makes a little more sense now. One, you got to get that R0 below 1.0 using non-pharmaceutical interventions, NPIs, or what are you talking about there? Really tight containment and isolation actions. You stop schools, large gatherings, all that stuff. We're seeing the world trying all this stuff right now, but you got to keep the economy going because it could be just as bad or even worse outcome from all sorts of standpoints. More people could die if the economy crashes and from this thing in the first place. So you got to balance those. I'm very sensitive to that. I understand the tricky thing that health authorities and political authorities are up against, trying to balance those two. But as well, you've got to keep the infection level below that, which swamps the hospitals, because if you don't do this, your whole hospital system crashes. Lots of people are dying from this disease they didn't need to, but people who are coming into the hospital for ordinary, usual other reasons like heart failure or cancer treatments find that they have a crashed hospital system. This is a very bad outcome, too. So you don't want any of these three things. So if you break containment to get the economy going, but you do it too much and you get down to here again, this is the balancing act, and there are no good decisions. So we're all going to be in this together, and we're going to have to think on a community level to figure out how to get through this together, because it's a very, very difficult balancing act from here. Still seeing the not the flu, not the stars. I'm just going to keep throwing this table up there so that people grab this, screenshot it, put it out there, share it, because there's lots of ways. This is not the flu, Dr. Drew and others. All right, we have lots of unknowns questions. I'm working hard to try and answer and address. Lots of you have asked these. I don't have answers for them yet. We don't know this. We don't know things like how infectious are asymptomatic people. Are they as infectious or less or even more? We don't know. It's an unknown. Do asymptomatic spreaders do so by droplet only or by airborne route too? Now, we're pretty confident the symptomatic spreaders are putting it out there by the airborne route, but we don't know about these asymptomatic spreaders. If this is the case, that's not good. So let's hope that it turns out that asymptomatic spreaders are poor at it and it's droplet only. The viral loads that we're seeing after recovery, are those still infectious? Don't know. Love to get an answer to that. Can you get reinfected? We don't know. But if so, is this via a new strain only, or is it by the same strain? Because that would be a very bad outcome if it turns out you can just get this thing again. That would not be good. How often is the disease biphasic, meaning you get better, but then you get worse again later? And so that biphasic thing, we think we're seeing that, but we're not positive right now. Because it could be somebody just has the flu and is still testing with viral loads, and they're confusing those two things. The symptoms from the new flu don't have anything to do with the virus that they're still harboring. And is this virus hiding in the nervous tissue for later reemergence? There's a nice, interesting paper that came out that posited that and noted that this is actually a feature of other coronaviruses, so we don't know if that's the case here yet. Conclusions. Summary for today, March 2nd, 2020. There's too much bad information out there, and a lot of it's coming from supposedly legitimate sources, especially the healthcare authorities, doing just a bad job in a few countries. All right, healthcare workers need to develop their own plans based on what information we have until the authorities get their act together and can come up with a consistent story. So just act as if this stuff persists on surfaces for a long time, disinfect like crazy, pretend it's airborne, and I think you'll be fine, okay? Particularly if you're in close proximity all the time as a healthcare worker to this. By the way, it's all over the place out there right now. I think you have to count on the fact that it's spread far, far wider than the case count. No matter if you have one case, it's just like cockroaches. I mean, you probably have thousands out there. Be a best guess right now. And again, most of them not bad. Most of them asymptomatic, but not for too many people, right? Vaccine is still going to be a long way off, okay? And it's certainly past the first peak of this thing. If it has a spring peak, let's hope it does. If we're lucky, we have a spring peak. And then, hopefully we'll get a vaccine before the fall outbreak, because there's a good chance, this thing's endemic. It's going to come back around again. It's going to go around the world a couple times. And hopefully we get a vaccine developed somewhere out of one of these many different sort of strategies out there. I'm a little worried about these out here because we had that bad animal data attempting to just get that spike protein immunity going. So maybe one of these does a better job. Let's hope so. But I don't know a lot about these, and I'm going to be very cautious watching the test results as they come out, if they share them with us. All right, final conclusion summary here is, now we're at the management stage of this whole thing. And a lack of planning means we're gonna have to triage. So we don't have masks for everybody right now. So where do they go? That's triage, right? Hospitals, if they get overwhelmed, they're going to have to triage. We can't treat everybody. So how do we pick who does get treatment and all of that. That's where we're at this particular story. So with that, I guess I'll close with just one last thing, to remind you to remember to resubscribe if necessary, because we've had lots of reports of people saying that they've been helpfully unsubscribed from this channel. If you want to keep up with these daily updates, then make sure you're subscribed. And the subscribe button way down here in the corner, just click it and make sure you're good to go. All right? With that, I'll talk to you next time. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.
Hi folks, Adam Taggart here. Chris Martinson and I are the co-founders of Peak Prosperity. If you want to get alerted whenever we release a new video from Chris, just click the red subscribe button right beneath the YouTube video player. Once you've done that, a little bell icon will appear right next to it. Click on that bell. It looks like this. And that's it. The next time we publish a video from Chris, you'll immediately receive a notification from YouTube. Thanks for watching our videos.